I'm glad to say that the radio show host and political analyst joins us again now. Garland, thanks for coming back on the mother of all talk shows. Let me ask you what I just asked Lara Elborno. Did Joe Biden just prove incapable of reading the map when he said, and it's of course repeated ad nauseum by all these stenographers of the mass media, when he said that these American troops had been attacked in Jordan? Or was he, as I suspected, Lara thought not, deliberately dissembling in order to provide cover for some violent spasm in retaliation? What's your view?
Believe it or not, I think that this is somehow in some way connected to the ICJ ruling. I believe that Biden and his team sat down and decided what their position was going to be, what their statement and argument was going to be. I think they recognized that their bases are illegal in Syria, that could be a potential problem for them in the future. It could be a potential problem for them arguing to the American people that the troops were, doing a just job, doing something legal. I think they recognize that any action they take, it's really a huge potential problem for them because the troops are illegally occupying a country. And in the same way, interestingly enough, that Israel is illegally occupying Gaza, the Golan Heights, etc., and that's complicating things for Israel as to make the argument for their response. It certainly complicates things for the United States empire to argue that they have a just response for an illegal occupation of Syria.
Yeah, that certainly was my initial thought. I suppose we'll see. It must have come as a shock that the natives can sometimes fight back. The United States government is used to dishing out violence. Now they've been on the receiving end of it, and quite substantially, almost 40 people killed or wounded. Their parents, their spouses, their children will have long to lament the utterly pointless, or is it pointless, presence in Syria of these American forces.
Well, the problem they have now is, and I think this is another reason that they wanted to try to say it was in Jordan or anywhere but Syria, because they cannot afford for an epistemological, an empirical discussion about the location of our troops. Our troops are in Syria illegally. The rules-based international order says the United States can do anything they want, anywhere they want, anytime they want. And the U.S. can never afford to have the discussion with the American people about what they're doing, because oftentimes it's in violation of international law. So this is going to be a real problem for the Biden administration, just having the discussion, an honest discussion about why the troops are there and should they be there. And now they have to, they're having this internal discussion that 3 troops were killed. Now are they going to take an action that causes 3,000 troops to be killed? Are they going to take an action that causes, dramatic problems as a result of doubling down on a really bad policy?
Well, Linda Graham was very clear, and John Cornyn, that you got to hit Tehran. That would, of course, trigger the wider regional war that Biden says he's been trying to avoid. Is he still trying to avoid it? Was he ever trying to avoid it?
Well, I think there are battles internally amongst the neocons as to, there are people like the John Bolton wing that wants to attack everything all the time, that aren't like a John Cornyn and a Lindsey Graham know good and darn well that if Joe Biden makes that decision and it goes really, really bad, that they can simply say, well, we didn't make the decision, we may have suggested it. So Joe Biden knows that he's kind of, hanging out on a limb. If he makes a decision that turns into World War III or God only knows what, the same people that were pushing him to do that are going to, immediately jump off the bandwagon and turn on him. The other thing that I think is significant is, the neocons had argued that they could keep the Straits of Hormuz open if we ever, of course we can attack Iran because we can keep the Straits of Hormuz open. Well, now that it's clear that they can't keep the Red Sea open. It's obvious they couldn't keep the Straits of Hormuz open. Therein goes the speculators on the energy market, the derivatives market. So if he takes this action, it could be an economic, suicide pill for the United States and a significant portion of the West, if not the world.
Now, I saw some staggering polling statistics today, Garland. 80% of Democrats support an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. 50% of Democrats think that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, and 20% weren't sure. At least half of all Americans demand a ceasefire, and a disproportionate number of them were the people that voted for Joe Biden last time. The Democrats are in a real pickle now, aren't they?
Yeah, the Democrats right now, the wheels are coming off the cart as far as the Democratic Party, because, the Democrats claim to be the good guys, the imperialist, intervention to save people and to save lives, et cetera. And now it's fairly obvious that the action they're taking, number one, they're not the good guys. Number two, the people in their party are opposed to it. So we're seeing a dynamic where Joe Biden came in and he made a number of promises to, regarding health care and student loans, et cetera, to his constituents, kept none of them, didn't even make an attempt to keep any of them. Now we're in a situation where on foreign, that's domestic policy, the ruling elite, particularly in the Democratic Party, are completely disassociated from their base. Now we're looking at foreign policy, where the same base says, no, we're not down with this. There's a moral contingent here, and we don't support this. And we're seeing that the ruling elite, particularly in the Democratic Party, are completely separated from their constituents when it comes to foreign policy. So at this point, I'll be honest, I've never heard and most people who understand United States politics know that Black America has always voted in a block for the Democrats, right? They've always, and it's been basically, a lot of it's been fear-based. A lot of it's been, okay, the Democrats are they're the Union and the Republicans are the Confederates, metaphorically speaking. I have never in my life heard the kind of statements that I'm hearing in the Black community about the Democrats, about the Biden administration, about supporting them, et cetera. The Democratic Party right now is in absolute and total collapse. The only thing they have left now is the Republicans are the bad guys and we have to stop Trump or something. And their constituency is starting to accept the reality that this party has spun completely out of control and it's suffering from a severe crisis of legitimacy. Basically, the constituents do not believe that the people running this party are legitimate, moral rulers of the party. And I don't know how they get out of this one.
But according to Nancy Pelosi, it's all Vladimir Putin's work.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense to me because, it's a narrative-based party at this point, absurd narratives. So she might as well have said that as anything else. What it tells me is this: they have run out of answers. At that point, when somebody comes to you and gives you a legitimate question about political policy, and you are a member of Congress, you're a representative of the ruling elite, and the best you can say is Vladimir Putin, something about the protesters, you've run out of answers and you're in deep and serious trouble.
Now, they clearly had coordinated, Garland. It was a conspiracy, really. They clearly had a plan. They told us they had a plan if the ICJ verdict went the other way. And now we know what the plan is. It's the UNRWA hoax, which actually deeply implicates, even more deeply than before, the US, the UK, all the other Five Eyes in genocide by cutting off food, yourself cutting it off, not Israel, you cutting it off. By refusing to fund it, you are placing 2.3 million people who are already on the cusp of famine into the pit of famine. Nothing could be a more genocidal act. And they clearly had planned it because within 24 hours, based on mere allegations about just 12 people out of 13,000 employees in the UNRWA, they all, one after the other, cut the funding. No words for that, really. Garland, help me.
Well, what we have is a statement from them in reality. When the fact that they did that on the date that the ruling was coming out of the ICJ means they knew what the ruling was going to be. Any thinking person could figure that out, and they wanted to make a statement because what we're seeing here is what the rules-based international order, the argument that 4% of the world in the United States can rule the other 96%, the argument that the United States is the judge, jury, advocate, executioner, etc., for the entire world and does not have to adhere to any international policies. That's the question at hand here. South Africa is arguing we can go to a criminal court of justice. We can make an allegation, an assertion, a complaint of a violation of international law, and the U.S. and its proxy ally, whatever you want to say, extension in Israel have to adhere to this international law. What are you going to do? And the United States answer is no. We're going with the rules-based international order, which says we can do whatever we want. And it's just a way of them poking an eye into the system of international law. I mean, poking a finger into the eye of the system of international law, saying we will make a statement on the day that the ruling comes out. And that statement says, no, we're not adhering to international law. I would argue this. I would expect that maybe a Syria or Libya, South American countries that have suffered from the machinations of U.S. imperialism now will be lining up to write their complaints and present them at the ICJ. That this is not, the United States has not heard the last of this battle between the international rules-based international order and the international system of international criminal justice that the rest of the world recognizes.
Does Donald Trump just have to sit there in Mar-a-Lago and the presidency fall into his lap? It's hard to see any other outcome at this moment.
Absolutely. And, Donald Trump, he's run off at the mouth and saying some foolish things. Now, a couple of things about Donald Trump. He recently, there are strong rumors. I don't know how accurate they are, but there are strong rumors floating around that he is seeking to talk to RFK Jr. about being his VP. Donald Trump recently made a preposterous statement that he would put 60% tariffs on anything coming from China, which would, of course, the tariffs are not against China. It's basically a tax against the American people. So I don't think the American people would be thrilled about seeing all of the stuff that they're buying, everything on Amazon, everything in Walmart, immediately a 60% increase. Yeah, I don't think that would go over big. But the bottom line is this: Donald Trump would be better off to be quiet right now, to pull the trick that Joe Biden pulled in 2020 and just claims that he has COVID and go hide in the basement, because they are putting this thing in his lap.
Yeah, it looks that way to me. That's fascinating, the RFK thing. Of course, it would be a bit of a two-headed monster on some issues. It would be quite a tug of war on other issues between president and VP. And one of the two has rather more political timbre than the other. I would have guessed there would be too much trouble in the House if he took on RFK. He's more likely to go for someone who wouldn't argue his corner all that strongly.
Well, John, here's the thing. Donald Trump is so unpredictable. I kind of thought Vivek Ramaswamy was going to be an option, but Donald Trump is so predictable. Who knows? The worst thing Donald Trump could do would be pick, one of these people that's inured to the system, because right now the system is creating an environment where Donald Trump looks like an outsider, and his best bet is to continue to, to play the outsider game, and they're just going to hand it to him. I do think that the Biden administration right now is so tangled up internally and externally. I mean, we've got this thing going on in Texas, where literally the United States is on the verge of some kind of a war between the states and the federal government. And they've got a problem that they can't resolve. We've averaged about 2 million undocumented immigrants coming in per year over the last 3 years. But the reality is, even the Trump people, the conservatives, the people who are saying that it should be fixed, they have a valid complaint. However, they will not address the problem, and that is that the United States destabilized the entire region in South and Central America. And this is the chickens of U.S. imperialism coming home to roost. So they're saying we want to deal with all the undocumented immigrants, but they still will not admit that the destabilization of entire regions has created this dynamic in the same way that getting rid of Libya brought in all of the African immigrants, on and on and on, that we've got a U.S. empire all around the world that won't admit that imperialist, aggressive, violent foreign policy is causing people to come to their country because it seems safer than the countries that have been bombed and overthrown.
Well, you've nicked what was my last question, which is if Russia now begins supplying weapons to Texas, it would not actually be a party to the conflict, would it, based on the Ukrainian model?
According to, well, here's the thing. Again, we get back to the ICJ ruling, because what you bring up again is this. According to the rules-based international order, right, the United States can do anything they want and no one else. The United States can provide weapons. We can do anything on Russia's border, in Russia, literally in a province of Taiwan. The United States has sent a delegation a province of China to Taiwan. So according to the rules-based international order, we can do whatever we want, and no one else can imitate it. So yes, what you bring up is the contradiction of the U.S. empire. And right now, people are going to start asking those questions. And like I said, I suspect this Syria attack is a big problem, because that's a discussion that the U.S. can't afford to have. What happens right now if the Assad government goes before the ICJ and says, we want to litigate the claims against us that we used chemical weapons against our people, and then we were attacked by the United States and NATO afterwards, we want to adjudicate that, and they present empirical data and evidence. Again, the U.S. empire is sitting there with so many skeletons in their closet that they can't acknowledge the legitimacy of the international criminal, the ICJ.
Incredible. Garland Nixon, as always, thanks for your wisdom and your wry humor. Very good to see you again.